Naveen, what is a moonshot?
Moonshot is something that most people at the first blush thinks it is difficult, if not impossible. But once you actually think about what is it as a humanity that we can do that will further the humanity and we can achieve it, that is what I call a moonshot. A moonshot is something that may look difficult, but it is worth pursuing. It is worth doing because it will actually improve the health of humanity. It will further the improvement of all of fellow humans.
I mean, personally, as you say that, I can feel myself being pulled to like, oh, I want to do that. But how does somebody
Yes.
tell the difference between something that actually is impossible versus we just haven't solved that yet and it looks really hard?
Yeah. So actually, before you start any project, anything, ask yourself three questions. Why this? Why now? Why me? Why this is essentially says that God forbid I am actually successful in solving the problem that I set out to solve. Would it help a billion people live a better life? And the reason to do that is not because you're just philanthropic. Of course, it feels good to help a billion people, but it's extremely capitalist thing to do. If you can build any product, any service that helps a billion people live a better life, you can create $100 billion company. But you never wake up in the morning and say, what should I do to create $100 billion company? Making money is simply a byproduct of doing things that improve people's lives. So if you can improve a million people's life, you got a company that can be worth $100 billion, right? So constantly you wake up every day and saying, what can I do to improve people's lives? And now you're creating an amazingly great business. If you are young and you don't understand what I'm saying, look at it from a different perspective. Making money is like having an orgasm. If you focus on it, you're never going to get it. So if you want to focus on something, just you will always end up poor when you try to focus on making money. Making money happens when you're actually doing things that make people's life better.
So why this first question? Why?
Why now? So why now has actually two parts to the puzzle. Number one is ask yourself what had changed in the last 2 or 3 years. More importantly, what do you expect to be changing in the next 3 to 5 years that will allow you to solve this problem at scale in 3 to 5 years? And this problem could not have been solved 5 years ago. And the reason to do so is to always think about, are you using yesterday's technology to solve tomorrow's problem? Or are you actually intercepting tomorrow's technology to solve tomorrow's problem? If you end up using the technology that could have been done 5, 10 years ago, by the time you are ready to scale, someone comes along and you're disrupted even before you have chance to scale it. So you always want to make sure that are you actually riding the wave of exponential technology? You are in fact, or you're being crushed by the tsunami that's coming, right? And that's really the trick, is to understand what's going on. In this framework, you never want to focus on how, you focus on what is it that needs to be done and not how you're going to do that. And the reason many entrepreneurs fail is because they start to think about how they're going to do that. And and most experts who start a company, they say, I don't know how to do it. So that means I'm not going to do it because it can't be done. Whereas someone comes along from outside the industry, they say, I understand what problem needs to be done. I'm going to find the right people to help me solve that problem. I may not know how to do it, but it's a problem worth solving. Right?
Wow. I think a lot of people just heard that. In myself included, that idea of intercepting tomorrow's technology, I think that's such a clear term. And then not trying to focus on how right now, because we don't have the how. And if we did,
Yeah.
somebody else is probably working on it. They're probably already solving it.
And the but way to do that is to break down a big problem into smaller chunks of problem, and then you start to see what problem is already solved, what problem is incremental, and what is the problem that yet to be solved. And if you can solve that, then you know everything else will fall in place. Right? So let's take an example, and I'm going to give you a bunch of examples because I want people to understand how to implement this framework rather than just simply have a framework. So let's take a something bizarre example. You say, I want to live on Venus. You don't say, that's not going to happen, right? we say, okay, what would it take for us to be able to live on Venus? You have to be able to leave Earth orbit. Problem number one. Problem number two, you have to go all the way from Earth orbit to the Venus orbit. Got it? Number three, you have to be able to land on Venus. Good. Number four, create a habitat to be able to live on Venus. And those are the four problems. And you start to say, okay, the first problem we already solved. We call that a rocket. We know how to do that. Number two, we have taken horizon that has gone way beyond our solar system. So we do know how to go long distances. Yeah, we have not taken humans there. So there is some incremental work that may have to be done, but that's a problem technically we know how to solve. Landing on Venus, well, we have landed on Mars. We landed through bouncing ball. We landed through a crane. We landed through what I would call parachute. And there were multiple ways we have done it. And maybe the atmosphere on Venus is lighter than Mars, and they may have to be incremental changes. But that's a multiple set of technology that we know how to implement, and maybe that can be done. And now it comes down to, hey, how are we going to actually be able to live on Venus? And that brings me down to the last question, and I'll come back and answer that for you, which is why me? And why me is the most important thing you ever ask, which is what questions are you asking that are different from what everyone else in the industry is asking? Because the questions you ask are the problem you solve. It changes the perspective on the problem by simply changing the question. So, coming back, if you say, hey, whether it's living on Venus or whether someday, if we believe there are going to be 20 billion people on planet Earth, how are we going to solve the world hunger problem? And if you ask any expert, they will tell you that means you have to increase the yield of the crop so you can have more food to be produced. You have to reduce the wastage that happens during transportation because the tremendous amount of food that gets wasted during transportation. But no expert will ask the question, why do we eat food? Because when you ask the question, why we eat food, you realize we need energy and we need nutrition. What are the different ways can we get energy? But plants get energy from radiation, photosynthesis. Guess what? There are bacteria that are growing in radioactive nuclear waste. That means they have figured out how to protect their DNA from radiation and use radiation as a source of energy. Can we take the genetic material from these bacteria, use CRISPR in vivo, modify ourselves, and suddenly not only be a radiation resistant, honey, do you want to go out and get some radiation? No need to eat pizza, right? And my point is simply changing the question allows the possibilities of the solutions that would have never been even considered if you didn't ask that question. And that is the crux of actually when people call why people who are non-experts are able to challenge the foundation of everything that experts have taken it for granted.
Wow. Wow. I mean, first off, in doing the research for this conversation, I came across the incredible success your children have had, and I feel like just through that answer, I have a sense for why they've been able to kind of do things and explore the world maybe in ways that others haven't. But you're also touching on this amazing ability to break down and do things that haven't been done yet. We've just jumped right into this. How do you explain to somebody who you're meeting for the first time what you do?
Well, it's actually when you tell someone what you do today, it becomes for them more or less something they may say, I don't care about it, what you do. What you really want to frame is what is your moonshot? What is that North Star that you're trying to solve? So if you were to ask me when you meet me the first time, I would say, this decade of my life, I am focused on making people live healthier at 100 than most people today live at 50. That's what I'm doing, right? Now, but the first thing people say, wow, so what is it that you're doing to make that happen? Now you can have a conversation about how you're going to make that happen. If you tell someone, well, I am telling you supplements or I'm doing a tool test or I'm doing this, people say, whatever, right? That is not what you're doing. You got to say, what problem are you solving today? And By saying that this decade of my life, you're saying that I'm willing to put 10, 15 years of my life to solving this problem. So that shows that you're committed, you are determined, and you're going to take whatever it takes to actually solve this problem, which is how do we get people to live healthier at 100 than most people live at 50 today, right? That is so, in some sense, unlike many women, men have a fundamental problem. Whenever you ask someone, I'm just telling, this is really very interesting concept. A men are defined by their business card. You can ask anyone, anytime you meet someone who says, "Oh, hello, what do you do?" "I'm a CEO of blah." Even after they retire, you ask them, "What do you do?" "I'm a former CEO of blah." They just have no identity other than their damn business card. And I find that to be really funny that we as humans spend so much of our life and we define ourselves by our business card. So if you were to ask me at any point of time in my life, I will tell you I'm an entrepreneur who just believes that big problems can be solved. And if we all humans come together, there is not a single problem that we can't solve together. The only thing that limits us to what we can't do is our imagination. And our imagination is what limits us to what we can do. And that's the reason why science fictions are some of the best ways we actually say, I wonder if we can build a teleprompter. I wonder if we can have a way for us to scan our body and know exactly what's going on. And that really is because it gives us imagination.
Wow, cool. I mean, that idea of like what am I working on this decade, and framing around that moonshot of decade, I find that really powerful. And if I go back through your decades, it looks like, you know, you've gone from internet search with InfoSpace, mining the moon with Moon Express, and now a big part of your focus is human biology with Viome. What connects the dots on all of those for you?
And I think every one of those companies in their decade was solving a problem that was seemed like difficult, if not impossible. So go back, and it's very difficult for people to put themselves in the days I'm talking about now, right? So now go back into 90s. There were no iPhones. There was no phone that you could go out and get a stock code or get your email, get a calendar, or know exactly, order a Starbucks from your cell phone, right? Now, guess what? So this is very interesting. I am running a company called InfoSpace at that time. In year 2000, I am an interview that you can actually Google and find out, a woman named Leslie Walker at Washington Post. And I'm telling Leslie, one day we are going to have a phone. You'll be able to get your email, your contacts, your calendar. It will know where you are. It will, when you drive by, it will give you a coupon for Starbucks. Instead of using your credit card for a payment, you'll be able to use your phone for a payment. And this is year 2000. She looked at me and said, "Sir, I have no idea what you're talking about. Not in my lifetime." And when Steve Jobs, 7 years later, introduced iPhone, I called her and I said, "Leslie, hope you're alive. It's starting to happen." Right? Point was, it wasn't that I had a crystal ball that I was using to see what the future was. To me, it was so obvious, and I'm going to say things that you're going to probably start to see how old I am. In those days, we used to have Palm Pilots that you could do your, you could get your email, contact, and a calendar. We had a pager. The pager actually will be able to get an instant communication, and we had a flip phone that you could call. And everyone, when I say the phones, people thought, how would this tiny phone with a tiny screen you ever get your email or any information? This guy is crazy. And I kept thinking, why can't someone put a phone and a pager on a Palm Pilot and you will have a device that will have everything? And that literally what became iPhone, right? So so idea really is, so in that decade, I was trying to solve a problem. What if you had information at your fingertip? What would you do with that information? What are the kind of problems you'll be able to solve if you could do that? And we built the company who actually built these services that I talked about on that phone that did not exist. And then I went out and told the whole Wall Street, look, This is the vision. I may be wrong, but what if I am right? What if I am right? There are going to be billions of these phones out there. Everyone will be using these services. And if I am right, imagine what opportunity you would have created. Right? And that's you. Now you have created a massive FOMO. My God, what if he's right? You miss out on everything. And that company went on to become a $45 billion company. In those days, billion meant something.
I turned 45 3 days ago. So you're speaking my language as you talk about the 90s. I certainly remember those days with Palm Pilots, even, dial up internet and just what it meant to be exploring this brand new thing. That iPhone story is really fascinating. I mean, not just that, this vague idea of what might become it, almost kind of like describing it with tangible detail. What are you seeing now? What do you think you're seeing in the vision now that might sound wild to somebody, but you feel like this is obvious, this is coming?
Um, so I can tell you the biggest thing is really is our human health is going to be fundamentally changed. And I think this is a prediction I'm willing to make. In the next decade, while we're still alive, you will see us actually be able to understand the human biology at a molecular level, where we'll be able to actually live disease free, cancer free, for as long as we want. That means we will make the diseases, chronic diseases, optional. It will be matter of choices we make every day, not a matter of bad luck. In fact, when I started Viome, that was a fundamental belief. And the reason is, for the first time in human history, we are now able to produce, digitize the human body. And once you can digitize the analog, anything that's analog, once you can digitize it, you'll be able to process and use the digital tools to be able to actually use AI to know what exactly is changing inside your human body that is causing you to gain weight, causing you to have diabetes, have heart disease, depression, or anxiety, or Alzheimer, or Parkinson, or cancer. And once you understand what is it that's happening, you'll be able to diagnose them early. You'll be able to prevent them from happening, and you'll be able to reverse them if they do happen. And that is absolutely going to happen. That means we as humanity, I would never say will become immortal, but will definitely will stay healthy as long as we live, because no one wants to live to be 200 years and spend the last 100 years in ICU. But we do want to be, if we live to be 100 years old until the last day we die, we want to be able to do the things that we want to do, as if we were in our prime, right? That means you want to be able to die on Mount Everest because you were able to climb Mount Everest on your last day.
I mean, as you describe that, it literally is mind blowing to think about what that means, not just in 10 years, but in 60 years, or, you think about and you project that forward. Now that it feels wild to think about, especially if I think about kind of where we're at right now, like current state. And I know this isn't the full world, but, in broad statements, like American health is showing poorer health outcomes, lower life expectancy, higher rates of chronic disease than other countries that would be kind of peer countries. What's happening now, if that might be what is coming in 10 years? Like, why is this happening now?
Yeah. So I can tell you a couple of things here. So let me, if you don't mind, this is not an infomercial for Viome. I just want to tell you where the technology, how far the technology has come now. Today, you and I, you can go and actually get a at-home test. So today at Viome, you can go to viome.com, order a at-home test. You give us a spit of your saliva, finger prick blood, and a touch of your stool. And guess what? We analyze 100 million biomarkers. 100 million biomarkers. Based on that, we can tell you everything that's happening inside your body, because now I know your oral microbial activity, all of the human genes that are expressed in your mouth, all of your gut microbial activity, and everything that's happening in your gut lining. every from the fingerprint blood, I can now look at every single human gene expression. That means all of your mitochondria, all of your immune system, and interaction between all of that. By doing that, I can tell you what your biological age is, what your brain health is, your heart health, your oral health, your gut health, your immune health, and all the nerdy stuff. And based on that precision, I can tell you, hey, Tyler, don't eat avocado, even though everyone tells you it is healthy. For you, it is not good right now because your uric acid production is very high and you're going to end up developing a gout. And here's a science paper for it. Or don't eat spinach and almonds, despite Popeye telling you that spinach is good for everyone. Popeye was not a scientist. I'm telling you that your oxalates are not being degraded, and spinach is very high in oxalate. You're going to end up getting a kidney stone. And please don't eat broccoli or cabbage because your sulfide production is very high, causing inflammation. And these food are very high in sulfate. But you can eat red meat if you want, even though I'm a vegetarian, but you can eat red meat because the choline and carnitine in the red meat is not being converted into trimethylamine TMA in by your gut. And fortunately for you, your liver is not producing enough FMO3, so it's not going to convert them into TMAO, which causes the plaque. And by the way, don't take vitamin B2 with that. Right. And that means very clearly I can tell you what foods you should eat, why, and a science paper for it, what foods you should not eat, why, and a science paper for it. And then we go out and say, look, you also need to make sure every day you take 22 milligram of elderberry, take 45 milligram of lycopene, take 89 milligram of amylase. We walk you through every vitamin, mineral, herbs, food extract, digestive enzymes, amino acid, and then we custom make that supplement only for you and ship it to you every single month. So these are mine. It says manufactured on. They're made for me 10 days ago. Every month I get them made just for me. I get a personalized probiotics and prebiotic made just for me. I get my oral lozenges that are made for me. I even get my personalized toothpaste for morning and evening made just for me. Now, you see all this stuff, and how do we know it does something? We did double-blinded placebo-controlled studies that shows in 90 days, if you follow the personalized nutrition, which is foods and supplements, if you are a pre-diabetic, you became healthy. Your HbA1c came down by 0.42 and you became healthy. In fact, people who had IBS, 15% of population suffers stomachache, constipation. 64% of the people became healthy in 90 days compared to 10% on placebo. 74% of the people who had depression or anxiety, they became healthy compared to 28% people on placebo. Right. So now imagine that just using the food as a medicine, we are able to deliver and reduce the burden of chronic diseases. Now, I am not political, but finally, at least if any one thing, they are doing many, many things wrong in our current administration, but one thing I got to admire what they're doing, they're putting the F back into FDA. Right now, finally, they got the food as a medicine. When the FDA commissioner, I've never heard an FDA commissioner talk like this. They say 90% of our healthcare dollars are being spent on chronic diseases. Chronic diseases are being caused by your gut microbiome. Every person should be looking at the food and supplements as a first line of defense, not the drug. You would never hear FDA commissioner talk about that, right? And that to me is the biggest change, knowing how the food is grown. What do we put in the food? There was this ultra processed food, removing these chemicals like dyes and stuff from the food supply, removing the glyphosate from the food supply, eating foods that are actually good for you. And by the way, nothing that I'm saying, Tyler, is a groundbreaking. This is what we knew 2,500 years ago. Every doctor takes a Hippocratic oath. And you know what Hippocrates really said? He said, interestingly, he said, all diseases begin in the gut. And you can Google that. Then he said, let food be thy medicine, let thy medicine be the food. And one man's food is another man's poison. Now, this is what we knew 2,500 years ago. This is what I was told in Ayurveda and Eastern philosophy, that you are able to, there are certain foods that are bad for you, there are certain foods that are good for you. So it's not the food that's good or bad. We learned that there is no such thing as universal healthy food. Now, we have now analyzed, Tyler, 1 million people, 100 quadrillion biological data points. We learned 42% of the people are harmed by spinach and almonds. 47% of the people are harmed by avocado, right? 37% of the people are harmed by broccoli and cabbage. And this really breaks my heart. I did not know 45% of the people benefit from eating red meat. And I'm always been vegan all my life.
Okay, so those weren't just made up examples. I mean, that actual data that you're pulling in.
Yeah.
What's allowing this? Like, what's the technology that's driving this? And I think I asked this without any knowledge about this, but I feel like we're in the age of AI, so it feels like anything we're talking about has an AI connection to it. Is this AI, or is this built on a totally different
Both.
base of technology?
So here's what happened at Tyler. Coming from outside the industry, so let me just step back for a second and give you why I started While. So 8 years ago, I was running Moon Express, and we became the first company ever to get permission to leave Earth orbit. And someday we can talk about what that means. We actually had President Obama sign into the law that says anything we bring back, we get to own it. It's called the Space Resource Act of 2015. We became one of the 6 companies to get $2.6 billion NASA contract to mine the moon. I would have been on the top of the moon. And then my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And my life completely changed. I didn't even know he was sick, let alone he had stage 4 cancer. And it really disturbed me that I'm thinking we can colonize moon and we cannot figure out what's happening to our fellow humans right on Earth. And I said, enough is enough. I'm going to go and solve this problem. Right? And that reason I did that was because I realized I can look at this problem from a very different perspective. So I went back and said, look, is this problem worth solving? What if we can actually understand what changes in the human biology at the onset and during the progression of the chronic diseases? If we can understand that, we'll be able to diagnose them early. We're going to prevent them. We can reverse them. And if we can solve them, why this? Would it help 1 billion people? Answer is 8 billion of us are going to be helped because every one of us is going to suffer through them. That's good. Why now? And we said, look, the cost of sequencing or cost of digitizing the human body is coming down. When we started 8 years ago, it was $1,000. And I really took a deep breath and said, we can't help 1 billion people if the cost is $1,000. But guess what? In the next 3 to 5 years, it used to be $10 million, $1 million, $100,000. In 3 to 5 years, it's plummeting. And I think it'll be under $100. Today, we sit here and it is $4.73. Right? We processed the data that we got from sequencing, and we knew we would never have access to the cloud. We will never have access to supercomputer, but we can use cloud for it. We fired it up. It cost me $47 to process the data. Wow, that's a lot of money. But guess what? We know the processes are getting faster. Its storage is becoming cheaper and cheaper. In the next 3 to 5 years, it should be down to $10. Today, it is 95 cents. Right? We all knew AI is becoming more and more powerful. We'll have the AI to be able to do unsupervised learning, and it will need massive amount of data. So if we can get millions of people to do that, we'll have quadrillions worth of data, and AI can process all that. So we say, why now? The timing is right now. Then we say, why me? And we noticed that everyone in the industry was focused on wanting to know your genes, your DNA. And first question I asked myself was, interesting. Does your DNA actually change when you develop chronic disease? So if I do my DNA test and I gain 200 pounds and I do my DNA test, it's the same. If you go to a crime show, it tells you DNA never changes. Now, I now become diabetic. You do my DNA test, it's still the same. I have now depression, I have anxiety, my DNA is still the same. Then I develop a heart disease, no different. And then I die. 100 years after I die, you do my DNA test, it's still the same. DNA can't even tell you you're dead or alive, let alone are you becoming healthier or sicker. So my first question was, what did change? And people say, you should know your high school biology. It is your gene expression or your RNA. Not knowing anything, my first reaction was, why not just measure RNA? And you never see how. You say, great, we're going to measure RNA. Is that the problem? Yes. Second problem is 99% of all the genes in our body don't come from my mom and dad. They come from these microbes, 100 trillion microbes that live in our gut, in our mouth. Wow. Does it matter? So I start Googling Parkinson's and microbiome. Well, Parkinson's starts in the gut 15 years before you see the first symptom. Alzheimer and microbiome, cancer and microbiome, diabetes and microbiome, depression and microbiome. Everything looks like it's connected to microbiome. And I said, wow, if everyone believes this is a problem and there are 15 companies doing microbiome testing, why is this problem not solved? And I went back to the same, what questions are they asking? Turns out they're all asking the same questions that the DNA companies. I want to do the DNA of the microbiomes to tell you what organisms are in Tyler's gut, what organisms are in Paul's gut. And I said, wait a sec, I don't know what these organisms are. In my mind, they're tiny, tiny humans. And if they're tiny humans, it doesn't matter what their names are. What matters is what are they doing? And what if we can focus on what they are actually producing? Because same human, put them in a good environment, good behavior, put them in a bad environment, bad behavior. What if organisms behaving the same way? So if we focus on what they are producing, what they are expressing, how they're interacting with the human body, that is the problem. If we can solve this problem. Now, all I have to do is solve this problem. I thought it's the easiest thing. I went to Stanford, I went to MIT, I went to Duke, I went to NASA, and I finally am Lawrence Berkeley, Lawrence Livermore. I was at Los Alamos National Lab. You know what it is famous for, Tyler?
No.
Oh, come on, you have to know that. Oppenheimer movie, Los Alamos National Lab, atomic bomb.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So even though everyone thinks for the Manhattan Project, it wasn't done in Manhattan. It was done in Los Alamos National Lab. What could they possibly be working on 50 years later? Biological stuff. So they are building a biological defense. They spent 10 years, God knows, untold sum of money to protect our country from biological weapons. What problem they needed to solve was very simple. They couldn't care if there was a terror in our great country, what to do. They wanted to know not what was there in the biological bomb. They cared about what they are expressing, how it's interacting with the human body so they can create antidote for it. And I'm thinking, wait a sec, that's the same problem I'm trying to solve for quantum physics. Now, it is a long story. I got an exclusive license for that, and I started Viome. And that is the technology that allows you to see every human gene expression, every single what's happening with your microbe, how are they interacting. And AI that can take this 100 quadrillion biological data and say, look, people who have diabetes have this is what happens to them. People who are gaining weight, this is what's happening. Genes that are overly expressed or underexpressed. And now here are the foods you can change to overexpress or underexpress these genes. Now all I have to do is match the food to the gene expression and we have a problem solved. Right? That is basically a thought process from someone who has no background in science, who has no background in medical science. But guess what? The person who developed the technology, I hired him to become our chief science officer. I hired the head of IBM Watson Research to do all the AI for me. And we put together the team. But guess what? I didn't have to be an expert. And the only reason I'm saying that, Tyler, is everyone who is listening to this, I want them to know, don't say, how can I do this? I know nothing about it. Well, the minute you say, I know nothing about it, is your biggest asset. That's not your liability. That becomes your asset because no longer you're bound by the limitations of the expert thinking. You're able to challenge the foundation of what every expert has taken it for granted. Every single thing that you think is your liability, make that into your asset. So, for example, as you by this time you probably figured out, I speak with a very thick Indian accent. Now, guess what? That is not my liability. That is my asset. When I am in the room, If you were speaking like anyone else, a Caucasian person who born in this country, I could be texting and still can understand what this person is saying. When I am in the room and speaking, if you don't give me 100% of your attention, you don't understand a word that I am saying. Guess what? What my asset is. When I'm in the room, I get 100% of the attention from everyone else, right? That is an asset. So I don't have to think, oh my God, I got to be like everyone else. When you become like everyone else, you become an average.
I mean, I first I can feel that. I can feel like leaning into the way you speak, but that flip of thinking from this is something that's binding me or a limitation to flipping it to say, but what does that open the door from? And I think just the liberation that offers, and the ways in which people can start to take on problems that maybe they feel on the outside of. Because I think I really appreciated you sharing that story about your dad, because I think that speaks to where a lot of people who aren't in technology are almost struggling with it right now, where there's the frontier of tech, which is doing all these amazing things. And then there's the Thursday of tech, which is like, but this is my life and this is what I'm feeling. And this is what feels like the problems that matter to me now. Yes. And I really appreciated how you brought those two worlds together. Obviously, this extreme customization of diet and microbiome is amazing. It's so powerful for someone who would hope to do that. But right now is at the Thursday of where they're at with this challenge. What would you say is the one thing that somebody could do today to start addressing some of these health concerns they may face?
Well, first of all, I just said it is for the first time you are able to do these things, whether you're starting your own company or if you're an individual wanting to help your own health at a price point would have been price prohibitive. You had to have gone to a functional medicine doctor, you spent $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 for doing these tests. And even then, it was those tests were not available. Today, now all three tests, you can get them for $300-$400. Think about that. For $400, you can get all of these tests done with 100 million biomarkers, right? You can get all of your personalized supplements, your gut biotics and everything for a couple of $100 a month. I mean, this is not no longer, everyone used to say that health is your wealth. But what they forgot to say was you had to be wealthy to be healthy. And what I'm saying is that's no longer true. You don't have to be wealthy to be healthy now. Health has no longer is optional. Health is actually something you can do today. If you want to be healthy, there's nothing that can stop you from being healthy, right? In fact, the day one when we started the company, it says, imagine living in a world where illness is optional. And every one of our, it's really interesting. In our box, the first thing it says, imagine a world where illness is optional. And people used to get very mad when we launch and say, are you telling me that I'm sick? It's my fault? Answer is yes. It is the choices you're making every single day is making you sick. Don't tell me it is your ancestors. They're less than 5% of the diseases, which are what I would call genetic diseases. And they call rare genetic diseases because they are rare. Rare genetic diseases, just because you have certain genes and have propensity, doesn't mean they're going to express themselves, right? It is like saying that I have bad thoughts. Bad thoughts are fine. Just don't express them. In that case, there is no crime. Every one of us has bad thoughts. Everyone has bad genes. But guess what? Don't express them. And that's the thing. 95% of the chronic disease comes not from 5% from genetics and 95% from lifestyle. The food choices you make every day, the stress you're living under, exercise you're not doing, or the sleep or purpose. And those are really the 5 things you have to do. People who live a life of purpose tend to live 10 to 15 years longer than the people who have no purpose. So find something that you're willing to die for and then live for it.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that final statement, I haven't heard of purpose described that way. And I think the other thing that caught my attention, as you said, are you saying that being sick is my choice? And you said yes, in lots of ways, the expression of you, the way that you're expressing I mean, I think that probably hits a lot of people in a challenging way for sure. And
It does.
Yeah.
It does. But the same people, Tyler, will tell you, if you ask them, they say, is being healthy is a choice? And most people will say yes. But when you tell them being sick is a choice, they get very offended.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So I'm almost asking this for a mom who's been quite passionate about health ethics.
Yeah.
What are the things you're thinking about from a health ethics perspective to protect people as you go through this?
So, I mean, to me, not taking care of your health is not about you. Not taking care of your health is actually the most selfish thing you do, because not it's not about you suffering or you dying. It is about the damage you leave behind when you are suffering on your deathbed. And think about the impact it has on your family. Impact it has on your community. Think about all the things that you could have done, that you potentially could have done, that not able to do. Now imagine if Steve Jobs did not die from pancreatic cancer, how much more innovation would have happened? How many great souls have we have lost to these chronic diseases, whether it is from suicide because they were depressed? How much of the loss of the great humanity or humans we have had, that could have been prevented? And that to me is a problem, is worth solving. Uh, I want to just go back on one thing you had talked about, that children, and I want to just maybe spend the last 5-10 minutes on how do we raise children that actually end up doing audacious things like. So first of all, as you mentioned, we have, I'm by the way 66, turned 66 2 weeks ago. And by the way, my biological age is now 33. It's really amazing. I am healthier today at 66 than I was at 40.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Right. When I go back and you look at my photos, old pictures on the internet, I was 50-pound overweight. I had no energy. And today I climb 2 stairs at a time. I go hiking 5-6 miles a day. I'm started to do the strength training now. And I do 200 pounds in my squats and 150 pounds in my chest press at 66. And I couldn't have done that at 40, right? So my
Wow.
point is, it's not that what age you are. Chronological age is simply about how many times the earth has gone around the sun, and your biological age is how much damage have you done to your body every day with your choices that you make. Coming back to it, I have 3 children. My oldest is 35. He runs a company called Built. So if you are renting a place, you probably are using Built. And that company, in the last few years that we started, is now processing $100 billion in transaction. And the company is valued at $12 billion. Right. Now, my daughter, so by the way, he went to Wharton. My daughter went to Stanford. Stanford is STEM fellow, Stanford Mayfield fellow. She runs a company called Evvy, EVVY. Now, that's a women's health company. And she said, Dad, did you know that until late 90s, women weren't even allowed to be in clinical trial? That means every drug women take were never tested on women. They don't work on women. Women are diagnosed with diseases 7 to 10 years later than men. She wanted to fix the gender gap. And she started a women's health company. Every single person who's listening to it, if you're a woman, get it for yourself. If you have men, get it for your mother, get it for your girlfriend, get it for your spouse. Give them the chance to be healthy. Is go to evvy.com, EVVY. And I'm going to promote my daughter all day, but it's an
Proud parent
unbelievable
coming through.
company.
Yeah.
Right? And really, so that company is now a unicorn because she went out to solve this amazing problem. My youngest also went to Stanford, a Schwarzman scholar, and Steve Schwarzman taught him how to be a great fintech person. He's on fintech, and now he's leaving the fintech to actually solve the next big problem. Can we actually find rare earth elements and process them without damaging the environment from, say, ocean water? And really looking at his next big problem that he wants to solve. And every one of our children, how they do that, this is a couple of things I want to tell you about counterintuitive parenting, and then I'm going to stop. Because I want people to learn these lessons, that how could it be that children who are growing up in an affluent family, knowing that they don't have to work for a day, are working 17-hour days, 7 days a week, because they are looking to solve big problems. A couple of things we did very differently. Instead of telling them we have no money, we told them you never have to worry about safety net. Now, never play for singles. Go out and take on a most audacious challenge. Your job is every problem you solve, you no longer play for singles. You're never going to touch the ball and run. You're going to keep the bat high. Every ball that comes your way, you're going to swing it so hard. It's okay if you miss it because it's going to be the second inning and the third inning and the fourth inning and the fifth inning. But when you do connect, that ball needs to go out of the ballpark. And that's what I mean by taking on the audacious challenge. And you never fail. So here's the interesting thing about failure is everything you do in life is an experiment. In the experiment, as opposed to thinking, is it a success or a failure? It is an experiment that has an outcome A or outcome B. When outcome A happens, you do C and D. When outcome B happens, you do E and F. That means everything is simply a stepping stone to the next set of action and next set of experiments you do. Don't call them, this is a success, this is a failure. You simply call them outcome A or outcome B. And then guess what? When B happens, I do this. When A happens, I do this. But you constantly keep moving forward. That means don't look at the life as success or failure. Redefine what success is. So I told our children, your success will never be measured by how much money you have in the bank. It will be measured by how many lives you actually are improving. Your self worth doesn't come from how much you own. Your self worth comes from how much you create. So if you own a lot and you haven't created anything, you're still a parasite on society. So don't be a parasite, right? Now, in terms of teaching them how to think was very different story. When they were young, instead of reading them the stories, we'll sit down and say, tell me a story about a monkey and an ocean and a tree. Connect the dots that have never been connected. They look like something that cannot be connected. Now, Dad, your turn. Tell me a story about this, this, and this. Now, what we're doing is creating things to show them that every dot can be connected if you think creatively how they are connected. Right? Other thing was intellectual. The last thing I'm going to leave right here is intellectual curiosity. If you can do one thing for your children, is to give them intellectual curiosity. That means when your son or daughter comes to you and say, Mom, Dad, look how beautiful blue sky, rather than simply saying, looking up and say, wow, that's indeed very beautiful and encouraging them, what if you can allow them to challenge that and say, there is no such thing as sky. Sky is nothing but a figment of our imagination. It's simply the blue light that scatters and we see the barrier called sky. And by the way, there is no color blue. It is simply the electromagnetic wave that hit our retina and our cortex, visual cortex is actually creating the color. And it's not about teaching them science. What you just taught them is even the things they 100% believe in, it, with their naked eye, what if that is wrong? What if that's not true? And that allows them to constantly learn and ask questions. And what you've done now is instead of taking your children to the water and making them drink, you have made them thirsty. Because once you made them thirsty with intellectual curiosity, they'll constantly find the water and drink it. And that is really, as a parent, not only leave the better world for your children, leave the better children for the world.
We have a lot of parents who listen to this, and I think every parent needs to hear that. I mean, not all of them are going to come from the same context or background that you do, but I think that those principles feel so fascinating and universal and somewhat timeless, really. Even in a moment where it feels like time is moving so fast, change is moving so fast, these principles. Naveen,
Let me tell you one
please.
more thing that most parents do, which has really bothered me always is, I grew up in a very humble family. I grew up in India. We had no food to eat. We had no place to stay. I came to United States 47 years ago with $5 in my pocket. And God has been very, very kind to us. And the reason I mentioned that is not that I grew up in a privileged family. We had nothing, right? And we were able to build a great life because we believed everything was possible. Now, when our children, as they were growing, most parents who have been self-made, they believe they need to teach their children the value of money. So what do? They spend their summer, go back and work at the grocery store, work at the gas station, learn how to make money so you see the value. To me, that is the most sadistic thing you do, because you say, I suffered and God forbid I'm not going to make you suffer now, right? Instead, our children are very simple. We said, look, this summer, what were the things you did not get a chance to learn because you were so busy doing your schooling that you want to learn in this summer? You can't sit at home. And so my son says, I really would love to learn about human brain because I never would have learned it. In high school, I can never learn that. Right. Let's go find a place for you to intern at no cost. Go to the Paul Allen Brain Institute and let me help you get there. That's my job as a parent. But you're going to go there and spend summer learning about that. My daughter says, Dad, I want to learn about how babies' brain develop. Great. Let me set you up with the University of Washington Pediatrics Center so you can go learn. Point was, it didn't matter. What we need to do is give them a chance to learn things, give them a chance to grow up, rather than saying, go do the menial task because I did the menial task when I was your age, right? And instead of starting them with nothing, just like you and I did, let's assume we start with the float and we worked hard and we got to be here, and tell your kids, go back to the same place, and maybe they're smarter than you, but they get up to be here. Why not give them a platform where you are and say, now you can go to the moon, Mars, and beyond. Take this platform. You are my children. Go use this as a platform and see what else
That
can you do.
is powerful. That is powerful. Naveen, what's the lesson that's taken you the longest to learn?
Is really learning to be just loving yourself. Most people just have such a difficult time. They always go back and say, hey, I wish I could change this. And answer is no. If you love yourself today, anything you have changed could have changed in the past will make you a completely different person, right? But if you can fall in love with yourself, the world will fall in love with you, right? That means no one can love you unless you love yourself. That means you have to find the joy and happiness inside you. Because the minute you find yourself to be unhappy, you will find that you could be in a paradise and still be unhappy. But if once you find the joy and happiness inside you, because you love yourself, you could be in a dark corner and still be happy.
What do you hope your legacy is?
My legacy really is going to be watching our children do even more audacious thing than I would have ever dreamed about. And even better would be if they're able to pass on the same learning to their children, and our grandchildren end up doing even more audacious thing than their parents did.
I've been fascinated by this conversation. I feel like there's probably like 3 or 4 areas that if we had another chance to have a conversation, I would love to further explore. I'm curious if people want to follow what you're working on next, the big thing that you're trying to solve this decade, where would they go and how would they find that?
First of all, you can always follow me on all of the social medias on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can always, I have a website called naveenjain.com. You can look there. Go to Viome.com. That's V as in Victor, IOME.com, Viome.com. And you can learn about everything that we're doing on this decade. And you can always reach out to me, send me an email, send me a direct message, and I promise you I'll reply back to you.
Naveen, this has been really fascinating. I mean, I've been fascinated by a number of things you've said today. I want to thank you for joining us on the show.
First of all,
Fantastic conversation.
my hats off to you for what you do, Tyler, and everyone who's listening to it. Please drop a note and say thank you to Tyler for selfless love he brings to you, because it's because of him you are able to have conversation that you can learn from. And so my hats off to you, Tyler, for selflessly devoting your time to bringing great knowledge to your audience.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for watching this interview on the icons. One of the things that caught my attention is that 97% of people who are watching our videos aren't subscribed. So if that's you, I'd encourage you to just click that button. When I actually found that out and said that in the office today, someone in our office gasped, like a real gasp. And so if you're interested in learning from the true icons, people who've had success over time, and trying to figure out how to apply that to your own life and doing it in a way that's a little bit motivational, that's why you'd want to keep watching this show. Again, thanks for watching.